Hello and welcome to the Southbound Sports Show. I'm your host, Richie Leahy, here with my co-host, Maddie B. Before we get started this week, I'd like to take some time to dedicate this show to our Pap, Andrew Tito, who passed away this past weekend. Big supporter of the show. He always listened. I think he was amazed that he could just talk to his Echo and tell it to play the Southbound Sports Show, and boom, we'd be right there. So I know it's been a pretty tough time for us. He's one of the biggest supporters of us, basically. Sports, music didn't really matter. Supported us. I think that's kind of the reason why we're so well-rounded. Definitely got me involved into sports. I tried to get him to cheer for Michigan for me. He never really went away. He's more of a local guy. Always pulling for Pitt or Penn State. But I know he cheered for Michigan deep down whenever we weren't playing either of those teams. Big supporter of local sports, I know. And Little League World Series, big fan of that. And there were times where we would go up during that. And so seeing that in person was all because of him. Would take the camper up and spend the weekend or whatever when I was a kid. So definitely love those moments. And sad he's gone. I mean, that's basically it. Matt, you want to add anything?
No, you pretty much hit the nail on the head. I mean, for a guy that was always at every Little League game, T-ball game, football game, whatever it was, if we were in it, he was there. So going to be different. Yeah,
definitely came as a surprise. And, I mean, like you said, any game he could be at, he was there. And he definitely took an interest, too, because even to this day, anytime he would see, like, a teammate of mine, I would have, like, no idea he'd even remember them. Be like, hey, I saw so-and-so. Here's what they've been up to. Like, give me a rundown, a report. So, definitely had a big heart, loved everyone. And so, he'll be missed. So, in memory of him, Matt, his favorite sport was NASCAR. So, who's your favorite race car driver of all time?
Of all time? Well, it would have to be Rusty Wallace because he drove the Miller car.
It wouldn't be Dale Earnhardt, the Intimidator?
No, it was the beer car.
Oh, man. I remember watching so many races and thinking, this has to be better in person than watching it on TV. Because even as a kid, some of my memories were just like of him falling asleep during the race. Like, hey, you got to turn your show off. I'm like, but I'm watching cartoons. Like, no, the race is on. 5 minutes later, he'd be asleep. I'm like, you're not even watching the race. But if you tried to change the channel, he'd know.
He'd wake back up. Hey, we're watching that.
So, but definitely going to racing, I would say that's one of the best events. I haven't ever been to a NASCAR race. Mainly watching my uncle race, amateur. They have like some of those at some of the night ones. But
the dirt track. And like I pointed out to one of our cousins earlier tonight, nobody wore any ear protection either. It was just ripping it with the loud engines and everything else.
I know. I did see an old video, and I'm like, dude, no one has ear things, and you can't even hear the video. The camera was clipping the entire time. So I'm like, why are you filming this? You'd have no idea what anyone is saying. You could just put on mute. So, all right, let's get into it. The NFL thing. This is kind of a callback to last year, because we talked about the healthcare policy for the NFL and their injury policy. So Tarik Cohen from the Bears, he's a free agent this year, and one of the many free agents I'm keeping an eye on, Joe Hayden, Cole Beasley, and those guys, trying to wait and see how some of their contracts shake out or whatever, tears his Achilles on video. Somehow it gets posted to social media and then finally gets taken down because it's disgusting. Like, let's be honest, you tear an Achilles, that's a big tendon in your leg. He's a free agent. The NFL put that memo out last year. It was like, hey, if you get injured, it's not covered unless it's at a team facility. And I know that was kind of geared at people coming back from COVID, saying like, hey, we need you in the team facility. Like, we know you got comfortable doing your own workout in your house, ordering McDonald's, Grubhub, whatever you're eating, because we know you're vastly out of shape when you come into camp. So you got to come on team facilities because we want you guys to actually be in shape. We don't want people getting injured or, like in Christian McCaffrey's case, like faking injuries all the time. Like, we need you to make sure that you're out there playing. And so now, like, I wonder if they're going to kind of soften that a little bit, I know there were pushback last year. There hasn't really been a statement from them. But seeing big name guys, because running backs don't really last that long anyway, and the fact that he was kind of waiting for a contract, it just rubs me the wrong way. Because they're always talking about, like, oh, player safety this, player safety that. CTE, like, hey, we don't have the research on CTE yet, but we're looking into it. Like, we're going to, it's like OJ looking for the real killer. It's like, yo, we're going to find it. But then a guy gets injured, tears his Achilles. They could easily take care of that for him, right? So I want to see them step up and take care of some of these injuries. It's like, hey, yeah, we know that you're an NFL guy. You've been playing for how many years? It's not like he wrecked a bike, like into a van, like a Ben Roethlisberger was like, hey, I'm injured now. Like he's working out, trying to get a contract. Go ahead.
But there's two parts to this. Number one, it's not like he was doing something like there's people out there that post the most ridiculous like workout things where like they're like holding exercise bikes like while doing pull-ups and different stuff. Like,
are you calling out James Harrison, Matt?
Like James Harrison, like just pushing a mobile home up a hill. Like I could see if he was doing something like that and got injured, but like it was literally cone drills and like ladder type stuff that he was doing when he had his injury. And I think like for what the NFL is investing, I'm curious to see like what some of those strength and conditioning programs look like at that level. That you would, I don't know, as an outsider, I'm thinking if I'm being drafted by a pro franchise, I would think that they would have the staff that would be training you like at a high level. I would think you wouldn't have to go away from the facility, or like why you would pay elsewhere for the support that you would be getting at the facility.
And that's kind of what I wonder. Like, if you are a free agent, are you able to just go to an NFL facility? Like, would that be frowned upon for some of these guys? And that's kind of where, and we're going to talk about the XFL soon, but I wonder if that's going to kind of open up some more, like, just another venue. I know some of the college guys go back and work out. Like, look at Alabama. They always have all their guys, like, hanging out. And I would think that if they got injured, Alabama would kind of step up or whatever and say, like, it's on our property, we'll take care of you. But a lot of times I think those guys that already have NFL contracts, if you're a free agent or you're trying to get back into the game, I don't know if there's really a place you can go. Like, are you just at the local gym, the YMCA or something, doing your workouts? I mean, some of the guys, they do have trainers and whatnot, but at a certain point, like, not everyone's making the big bucks. So some of the guys that have been fighting for a roster spot, they don't have that luxury of like having extra cash that they can burn on live-in trainers or extra gym time. So it's something that I want to see the NFL kind of clear up and really push forward, saying like, hey, we care about player safety. We know guys can get injured. We talk about injuries all the time. At some point, you really can't do much about that. That's just the sport. Any sport, people could get injured, right? So like, take care of the guys that are really trying to be, because they're vets. I know you have to have so many years in to get that veteran status or whatever to kind of get the healthcare stuff. So maybe Cohen has it. He's been playing for a while. But I really don't think it's been that many years, right? He's like one of the younger guys, I think. This is probably his first free agency. Maybe I'm wrong.
I don't know.
Because he's the older back, though. No, he's 26. He went to North Carolina A&T down here. And so what was he picked? Overall 29. It doesn't tell me what draft. Yeah, 2017 draft. So this has to be like his big first time thing. Now looks like he was a first round pick, right? Or no, maybe that's not right. That doesn't tell me his draft thing. No, fourth round pick. So even his rookie deal isn't like a first round pick guy. I don't know why that said 29th pick, because it wouldn't even have been there's like no, each team doesn't get a 29 pick. So sorry, I was reading that wrong. Well, it just had a weird thing. But he's picked in the fourth round. Guaranteed that was his first contract, right? Only been in the league for a couple of years. Finally becomes a free agent. Well, he actually just signed a 3-year deal. but they must have cut him because of his other injuries. Because he's rehabbing from an ACL injury. So just brutal that he's coming back from that. So I don't know. Like, what do they do? He's just basically career done at that point.
I think for him, it's long shot. Just recoup, and maybe if he has.
And I'm losing you a bit here now.
You get into like a Christian McCaffrey type injury, or I don't know.
Yeah, you're breaking up there. I don't know if we haven't had a breakup for a while, so I know what's going on. I know, if it's going to be a lingering injury, I think a team would take a shot at him. He did show some upside with them, just in terms of averaging 4 or 5 yards a carry. It's not like he was a poor man's back. Now, did he get that many attempts? Not really in terms of season. He is kind of a backup. But some of those guys you need down the stretch, but also you can't have guys that are injured too. So I wonder what will happen. The injury was on his Instagram because it was live streamed. So that makes sense. So it wasn't like he knew he was going to get injured and posted it. Hey, I wonder if a team will sign me if they see this video.
I'm going to go so hard I'd blow my ACL or my Achilles out.
Well, I didn't know if it was someone, a friend, that was hey, I'm going to post videos for you, and was just posting it, not realizing how injured he was, and then just never took it down. Because if you're there, you're going to be like, holy crap, buddy, we got to get you help. Let me get to the car, drive you to the hospital type deal. So yeah, you wouldn't really be deleting it until you got to the hospital or whatever. But it's just crazy. I mean, because even as a coach, you face a bunch of injuries, you don't want to see that. And a lot of it's outside of your control, so you want the best for the kids. You don't want to be forcing them back, or even the NFL. You're coming back from an injury, you get injured again. Sometimes that happens because your body's overcompensating. Were you coming back too soon? Which is just scary to think about too, because man, you're trying to make a team, you're a free agent, and then something else happens. So hopefully he can get it figured out and heal up 100%, because, man, even once you get to an old age, you'd be limping around, not even be able to run. You don't want that. Then you'll be in those commercials. Was it Franco Harris or one Steeler guy that would ride the thing up the stairs, his chair? Do you remember those commercials?
No.
I don't know what it was called. It was the rescue chair or something. It's too old to get up these stairs again, and he's wearing his Steelers jersey. I'm pretty sure it was a Steeler guy. Maybe I'm just misremembering, but I always thought how do you get in the chair? And what if someone else rides it down? What if you and your wife were using it? She leaves for work in the day, and you're sitting on a cardboard box and sliding down. What'd be the backup plan, Matt?
I would think that there'd be a way to recall the chair back to the other spot.
You would think, but this is the 90s, Matt. Did they have that technology? Did that exist?
I don't know.
Anything else you have for the NFL? I mean, there's not really a lot of news other than workout stuff.
No, just for right now, everyone's draft picks are panning out. Just getting them signed.
Well, I was saying about that last week, hey, yeah, I'm trying to read some reports, see if there's any controversy or whatever. As soon as the show's over, I'm talking about how everything's been positive. A bunch of stories are out about the Broncos and how they're we don't know what's happening. There was an article about how Russell Wilson came in and everything's been a mess. And it's hey, this is not how, we're used to having an actual team doing all this stuff. And apparently the Broncos organization hasn't been very structured. And I'm well, that makes sense. But you would think when Peyton Manning was there, and I know they went through a couple coaches or whatever, but it's if you have the same front office, wouldn't John Elway just be there, keeping things in order? I find it hard to believe that he would be letting things get out of control. But maybe he's just relaxed, and Pete Carroll hasn't. But that's what I want to see the difference this year. What's the Seahawks look like without Wilson. Because, like, they've looked pretty good, and he's kind of just been hitting, like, the age wall, where he's been getting injured or slowing down at the end of the year, and they've kind of just been falling off a cliff, kind of like Ben Roethlisberger. But if the Seahawks just roll out someone else and they're kind of fine, maybe Pete Carroll knows what he's doing still. Because, like, they've had, like, a bunch of turnover and stuff, and they're kind of like, yeah, we'll let him go. What's the real truth? Is the Broncos really dysfunctional? Because I saw an article today, it's like, what's the quarterback future for the Broncos? It's like, you guys just got Russell Wilson to try to take a couple years run. That's the future right now. Like, you don't want to Aaron Rodgers' situation, where what if you draft a guy and then you're in the NFC or the AFC championship game, because the Broncos now instead of the Seahawks, but you're in the championship game in 2 years or whatever, and you're giving Russell an extension. Meanwhile, you have a guy sitting on the bench. Like, if I were them, I'd focus on building the team around them. It's kind of like how the Steelers and the Packers both were like, hey, we know Ben's here and he's old, and like Aaron Rodgers is getting old. We're just going to build around the defense. And then on the offense, you guys do your own thing. And the Steelers will be like, we're going to kind of re-sign our guys, but we're just going to let them go because we think they're going to be busts. And they're kind of true about like Le'Veon Bell getting too old. But the rest of the receivers and stuff, it's like, hey, we don't have help for you. And then now everyone's giving the same thing to the Packers. Like, you're not giving Aaron Rodgers any help. It's like, he didn't take a cut. You can't ask for a ton more money and then be like, you didn't sign anyone for me. It's like, buddy, you're biting the hand that feeds you, right? At some point, you have to think, maybe this is my fault.
No, it's always somebody else's fault.
That's why I agree. Like, if I'm looking at around the league, I feel like those three teams, Steelers, well, I guess you can throw the Ravens in there, but the Broncos and the Packers, they kind of just keep building on defense. Like every year, it's like, hey, we're going to bring in Peyton Manning. Do we really need to get him weapons? Like, nah, son. We built this defense. We're going to win a championship game. Even the Rams kind of did that. They got the quarterback later. But those teams is always like, we're focused on the defense. Even whenever Lamar's there and the offense has been kind of faltering in the playoffs, they're always kind of like, our offense is good enough. We just need better defense. It's like, the game was 13-10. What do you need better defense? You need a guy that can score the ball.
But see, that's just following the protocol. You build your defense, strong run game, get the quarterback last, Super Bowl, done.
And then even if you do have a good quarterback like Tom Brady, they'll still blame him. Be like, Tom Brady sucks. It's the defense, right? What would he be without the defense? So I don't know. Didn't the Broncos also, didn't they have their receiver go down, Judy? Didn't he get in trouble?
He's being investigated. So
maybe they're right. Maybe they are having some type of issue. So, because what did he do? Yeah, he was like a domestic thing. So, will he be let off? Who knows? Those situations are just tough to read when you don't know what's going on. You have anything else for the NFL?
No, I think those were the bigger stories.
Yeah, I don't think any of the free agents I've been watching really signed anywhere that I've seen. So we'll be coming back. Hopefully we'll get some good news for some players moving around. Because like even Jimmy G, like what's he doing? Are the 49ers really going to go into the season without a solid quarterback situation figured out? And
why would they solve it?
Well, they're like, Trey Lance, we're going to play you. Like Jimmy G's like, what am I doing? You guys traded me?
Still here.
Like, where do you want me to go? It's like, oh man, it's insane to me. But let's get into the XFL now. Haven't really been talking about the USFL. I mean, I guess they're going pretty good. Not really too much coverage though, which is kind of shocking because if you remember when the AAF came out, they were everywhere. But I'll tell you the problem is the USFL is on the same time that the NBA and NHL playoffs are on. So it's like, who came up with this? Right? Baseball's back. So if you're not, you're like, I don't like the other ones. Like, I've been watching playoff basketball and hockey, and I'm like, oh, the USFL's on. I put the game on, and my eyes are on the playoffs. Like, I have the dual TVs. Everyone knows. You listen to the show. You put the other game on, it's like I'm not even watching. Like, normally for football or whatever, you can kind of go back and forth. But the way basketball and hockey are, basketball has a bunch of stoppages, but like hockey's going like nonstop, so you're kind of just watching it and doing whatever. So I think the XFL has a real chance here. If they don't, I think that's the biggest mistake of the USFL. The dumbest idea is to schedule it now. So if the XFL could kind of get something going like right in February, because now you're kind of like, I know they would be kind of going up against March Madness or whatever, and that's a big event. But again, after that first weekend, there aren't that many games. Like you get the teams down to like what, the Sweet 16, where there's only 8 games. You can easily have an XFL because they only have 8 teams. You can easily have an XFL game lead into the night games for the basketball or whatever, because they've been doing like them from like 7 to 10 or whatever. You could have the XFL on at noon, 1 and 4. Or even if you're doing a Sunday, just do 1 and 4 and then have the basketball games on after. That's what the NFL does anyway. 2 games on Sunday. But the XFL came out and announced they're signing a multi-year TV deal with ESPN, which is big because I'm wondering now how much the NFL is actually investing into this, because it's going to 2027. Most people would be surprised if the league lasted a year. These leagues have been folding mid-year, or playing 1 year and then having a championship, and then that's it. And then, like, Steve Spurrier is just the king of the AAF forever. He has a visor with the pen in it. But what do you think? I mean, you're a big football guy. Does it fit for you? Like, right now, the USFL does not fit for me, and it's so far in the back of my mind at this point that it's like, I don't even care about it. I think too much is going on, though.
Well, I think with the USFL, it just, we kind of talked a little bit about it before. I feel like their season, the league is just rushed. There's a lot of things that, they're priding themselves on making the weekly adjustments, and they're saying, like, this is something we saw last week in our games, and this is what we're changing. Like, they made the adjustment with the ball, and like with some of the clock issues to try to like keep the game within certain parameters. Like, they're making adjustments, which I think is kind of helpful, but there's nothing to draw like casual fans in. Like even like there is the technical like Pittsburgh connection, but like you said before, with being having all the games in that pod bubble in Birmingham, there really isn't that local connection, and it's like trying to find something to grab onto of like a player or something. Like there's a lot of guys that at this point are really unknown type people, so it's not like there's brand name people or like newer faces that you're like, oh, I know of that person. Like when there was some of the last rollout of the XFL came out, there was you knew a lot of those different style coaches, and some of the players that were going out, like there were people that you recognized. And I think that like that's been one of the challenges, is like there's a lot of like it feels like players that were under the radar that are like, who's even there?
And like you brought up the Pittsburgh team, them and even the Panthers with Shea Patterson, a guy that I would watch, they're awful. So like both teams are bad. They're in the same division. I brought up that problem before, having 2 divisions. And the more I think about it, it's like, fix the divisions. Like I've talked about bringing in some more college stuff this week, and I just didn't do it yet. But I saw that the SEC, they're talking about doing a 3-game crossover schedule. Someone threw out like a hypothetical that I think would it makes the most sense. But then they were still talking about, like, yeah, we're still going to do the SEC championship game, and there's going to be a lot of tiebreakers. It's like, you guys are focused on the tiebreakers. Do what I said and do a 2-game championship weekend. Whoever ends up with the best record out of there is going to be your champ, right? Because, like, if you have the number one team, oh, yeah, you're the number one team, and 2 and 3 were really close, but because of tiebreakers, 2 gets in. Well, why don't 2 and 3 just play, especially if number 1 and 2 is a rematch, and have 1 play 4? If 1 can't beat 4 and be the champ, then they don't deserve it anyway. And then have 2 and 3 play, and then they become the de facto champion. That way you have both games, they decide the outcome. You play the other one first in the day, so people like that would have a rooting interest or whatever, but then they would still have to watch the second game because the top team, the number 1 seed, would have to lose, otherwise they're the champ. And I think that would make the most sense to me, and you're putting yourself in a position to say, oh yeah, we have 2 strong teams here. And that way you're kind of set up too if they expand the playoffs, because they're not really talking about getting past 16 teams, right? And I think it would take forever to get there. But if you're looking at an 18 playoff, you're going to have 2 winners in your postseason championship weekend that you're going to say, hey, include us in the top 8. And that's kind of like what I'm looking at here for the USFL. It's like, oh yeah, we have these divisions. There's really one good team in the North. The rest of the teams are awful. The South has 3 teams with winning records. You're going to leave one of them out and put a losing record in the playoffs if you do 2 from each division? It doesn't make sense to me. Like, you only have 8 teams. What are you doing? That's kind of how, like, if they did the pods, like I was talking about, the pods would be great for scheduling, which is kind of what they're doing if they do a 3-team. Because, like I said, I don't see how you would say, oh, yeah, Big Ten, here you go. Penn State's getting Maryland and Rutgers as their permanent rivals with, like, Indiana or something, and then Ohio State and Michigan are like, that's bullshit. That's giving them like 3 wins every year for nothing. Like, and then they're like, well, we'll kind of do a round robin then, with you guys all playing each other and beating each other up. It's like, well, that makes more sense. So they're giving themselves a de facto pod of the four big teams in the East, which might be idiotic. It might not. Who knows? Who knows at this point? Do you have any thoughts on it before I go into my next little college thing I'm throwing in here?
I really just, it's hard to tell because of how different some of these expansions have gone and what way serves the conferences best. Because on one hand, if you're trying to tailor it to a certain team and then they lay an egg, like I almost feel like that was in some ways the way the Big 12 was doing, like originally aligning their conference, was that I think it was to try to be like, if we do it this way and we cut out like our championship game, or like we just make it 1 and 2, then Texas will be there. And I think they tried to cater to Texas, but then when like teams like Kansas are beating on them, it's like, oh great, now we don't have a conference like that's strong because everyone just beats on each other, and we're left to be in these like lower pre-Christmas bowls.
And going with that, I think a benefit of doing like what I'm saying is like you do the permanent rivals, but you kind of guide it so that the strong teams play each other. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy of everyone saying like, well, eventually there's only going to be like 64 teams in like an upper division. So like by putting Michigan, Michigan State, Penn State, and Ohio State in the East, that's going to be the teams that, you know, get promoted. And Rutgers and Maryland and Indiana are going to be the ones that are kind of forgotten. Over time, they're just like, no one's watching Indiana play Rutgers or Purdue or whatever, so they're just, with the money coming in, and this is big for you, because as a Florida State guy, have you seen that Florida and Tennessee have been collecting funds of millions of dollars, like $25 million, to like pay players flat out for like their boosters? Because like I've been saying all along, people think like, hey, we're going to have boosters that are just doing things, and you laugh about like, well, they're going to have a network set up of car dealerships. Like, yeah, good one. It's like, no, that's like literally happening. These guys are putting in money. They're saying, hey, come on in. We're going to give you these NIL deals. Like, what was the Miami one? They're like doing like a gym or something, like a chain of gyms. So they can just pick different guys to come in and do signings or do a commercial or whatever you need them to do, but they're getting their money flat out. So if these other schools are just doing it, like how the hell's Vanderbilt going to compete with that if they're not getting that millions right off the bat? If you fall behind, like look at the rest of the East. I mean, even Florida's so far behind Georgia right now, it's not funny.
You're already behind. If you don't have the system in place, you're already behind.
And even if you're like, I mean, I guess you could really turn it around in a few years if you really start paying. Like, look at A&M. But A&M already had the stuff in place, and same with Georgia. Georgia was winning. Basically, they were like at Michigan levels, where you're winning, you're just not winning the conference, you know? You're losing to like an Alabama or whatever. Once they start bringing in the top recruiting classes, guess what? People forget about that. They remember them winning, and they don't remember them getting smoked by West Virginia in like a BCS bowl game. They don't remember like that. They just remember them being like, yeah, they always seem to have 10 or more wins. Like, they're awesome. But it took this to get them over the top, right?
You know, I think it's interesting that you brought that up about like having Michigan, Ohio State, Michigan State, like in that same cluster, because that really is what you're seeing with the SEC, because you have Kiffin with Ole Miss. You have Saban with Alabama, like you have Georgia, like and Fisher at A&M. That when they beat each other, it's like, well, they're just playing tough level talent every week, and
yeah,
like they beat each other, and it's like, well, of course we need at least 2 or 3 teams in for the playoffs because they play such a tough schedule. Look at the teams they beat. It's like you beat the other teams in your pod,
and that's why I know it'd really piss you off if Penn State's like right there in the discussion, or Michigan, because they like finish second, you know, they lose to Ohio State, but then they would win that consolation game and be the 8th seed in the playoffs. Like, you know, that would happen. Because they're going to be like, who do we include here? 11 win Michigan that just beat up on Iowa or whoever they would play on in the other game. Or would they, like a Penn State, like 11, 12 win Penn State, or now with the expanded playoff, are we going to include like this upstart Missouri team, like, or some other team, like what's the Big 12 team? Like, yeah, Oklahoma State, they're really good this year. We could put them in, but we could really sneak in Penn State or Michigan here. Everyone's going to put them in. It's kind of like Notre Dame's been close. Hey, Notre Dame's been close. What's their schedule look like? Dog shit. And they're like, all right. Well, what are we gonna do here? They just got killed by Clemson. It's like, yeah, but they beat Clemson that one time, so they got to go in. Like, don't forget that Trevor Lawrence was injured. Notre Dame's in, and then it's like, oh, they lost again. Damn. maybe one year they'll get lucky. Notre Dame's been killing it too, though. Some of that could be a new coach, though, that's known as a recruiter. What happens? Does it fall off, or do they keep the funds going? The last thing I had here, and I didn't even put on the board, I forgot about it until we started talking random. The governing body of like NCAA, they're talking about getting rid of scholarship limits. So can you imagine how the teams that already have funds for these scholarships, first off, before they even do anything, you know how many sports teams they'll kill? A ton. Because
will they?
Men's. Because with Title IX, you need to have an equal number. If Michigan's like, hey, we're going to go back to the old way and we're going to have 100-something dudes on scholarship here. Because, like, why not? Because, Matt, this is literally how it used to be. Teams like Ohio State, Michigan would load up with, like, hundreds of scholarship players, while other Big Ten teams would only be able to afford 50. And then they'd be like, why are we getting our asses destroyed every year? It's like, yeah, because those teams are like 3 rows deep. It's like Alabama deep against like Vanderbilt, basically every week. And so now they're like, you know what, we should go back to that. And I'm thinking, that'd be nice. That would be nice. Why should Michigan be on an even keel with Indiana? Like, why should Penn State be struggling with Illinois, you know? Let them go ahead and pay, because Penn State has a big fund. I think I sent it to you on what the Penn State one said. Penn State put together a thing with Jay Paterno, of all people, where it's called Supporters of Penn State. It includes Jay. I think, well, it actually doesn't say Jay Paterno. It says including the son of Joe Paterno. Didn't he have a couple sons, or does he only have Jay?
I thought he had a couple, but yeah,
Well, this is the weird thing. People donating money, even as little as a few dollars, get access to the athletes. Why? What are you going to do with them? Like, how weird is that? You're like a 40-year-old guy. You're like, you know what? I'm going to donate some money to Penn State, or hell, even a 30-year-old. And you're like, hey, I need you to come over to my house. Like, having a kid's birthday party. Like, is that the kind of level that you're going to get access to them? Are you going to be calling them up and chatting them up? What are you going to talk to them about? Because
I got this Penn State guy to wash my car.
Could you imagine if you're on a Zoom with a bunch of like other old dudes, like it's some college kid, and you're like, I really like that run you did last week. He's like, thank you, sir. Like, how uncomfortable would that be? It'd be like almost like another interview, because I think that's how they'd have to do it, right?
I don't know.
That's the weirdest thing to me. It's like the first thing they have listed, it says, donors paying as little as a few dollars get varying degrees of access to the athletes. And then it says online get-togethers.
We're now best friends.
Some of them even have private events. And they're not even getting all the money. Most proceeds go to the players. Like, who gets the rest of it? Is it like the old Teamsters? Where Jimmy Hoffa's like, hey, look how much money I have. Then he disappears. Ah, man.
But I thought that was interesting because there's some reports that like the boards and stuff like that at Penn State are trying to go the opposite direction and not fund a lot of that stuff. So
they have to. Like I said last week, they're in the middle of nowhere. Like, what are you going to do? Like, if donors are going to say, hey, like, yeah, we know, like, we're alums, we have a big world campus, like, we have a big, large alumni base. We just want to pay football players. And they're like, can we use some of the money for other sports? And they're like, no, absolutely not. And so the school's going to look at it. And, I mean, it already happens. Like, I mean, just to call out Michigan, like, Michigan doesn't have as many sports teams as other schools, Matt. Because, like, they were just investing in, like, football and, like, basketball to an extent. And so, like, now lawmakers are even saying, like, oh, yeah, TV money should just be split between basketball and football players. Do you think that includes women? No. Otherwise, they would have probably brought that up, right? So the only thing that they're going to get is money from money from Title IX, like whatever scholarships men's get. That's how many teams they're going to have. So you're going to see some schools that have 100 football dudes on scholarship. That's going to be offset by what? 3 or 4 women's teams, depending on the sport. Maybe even some of the sports like softball, they're not going to have. Are they going to have 25 scholarship players? Is that even allowed? Thought it was more like 10 or 15. Like, they're going to have 10 women's sports to one football team, and then if they have men's basketball, then they'll have another one. So you're going to see schools with like 5 men's sports teams, and then however many women's teams they need to offset it. Whatever's cheapest, like, because you see guys getting half scholarships now to play baseball or soccer or whatever. Some of them are walk-ons, and they're getting like academic scholarships or whatever. That's only going to get worse now if you're going to open up the floodgates and say, well, football players are making most of the money, and as long as Title IX's there, we just need women's teams to kind of offset it. Like I would say, depending on the school, hockey would make money, not that much, but I think it would be enough to fund some of the schools. I think you'd see a bunch of other schools drop it if they're not getting that TV money. Basketball would for a lot of schools. I think that's why you see some of the Catholic ones only have basketball. Baseball, I would say, probably not. They probably don't fund it. Maybe only a couple of schools that really sell out their games could get money back. Football, I don't know what other men's sports would actually be making money, right? Just the big one. Soccer, I guess, for some of them, if they have fans, but even that, I don't know how like that would come across. And I know some donors, like Penn State had a donor that literally paid for their hockey team. So I guess if you had a sport that like you had like a tennis player that went gigantic and had millions of dollars, or like if Phil Mickelson said, you know what, I'm gonna fund a golf school because he got $100 million from like the whatever thing he's been involved in. Like, yo, if you're gonna get that and he wants to fund a golf school, like, go ahead, do it. But I think that's gonna be few and far in between. Like, I don't think it's gonna happen that much. But what do you think? Like, I think it's gonna change everything to me.
Oh, 100%. It's gonna change that landscape, and it just depends on like where you athletic departments feel like they need to invest that. I can remember at one point having a conversation with a coach, and it was always like for schools that utilize one athletic fund and then was splitting that money between all of the programs, it was always like there was more bias toward the football program because that was what brought the most money in. That was what typically had the most athletes, that had the most fundraising. It drove a lot of the other sports. That the money football raised was enough that you could also use that as the revenue to fund like tennis and golf and badminton and all those other clubs where you'd only have a couple kids playing.
And that's where I think you brought up clubs. I think that's what you're going to see. It'll be like so-and-so club team, which those guys aren't on scholarship. They're getting their own funding. Like they have to do their own fundraisers or whatever. If they don't have a donor funding the club team, that's where it's at. I mean, there are some Big Ten schools, I think like Iowa, they don't have a Big Ten hockey team, but they have a club team. And that's basically everything else is going to become, I think. Unless you have a television network like the Big Ten where they're like, hey, we need to have so-and-so sport on the TV. But with women's, if you have volleyball, softball in the spring, soccer in the fall, like I think you have enough sports just for women's to kind of fill the gaps outside of football and basketball. And I guess hockey, if the Big Ten has hockey, I know a lot of the southern ones, they don't have that for like the SEC network or whatever. They'd fill it with baseball and softball. And I think that's what you're going to get. Like, I think it's going to be like the track ones. They're going to pretty much just be walk-ons now. If they have Olympic ambitions, or I guess some of the sports like gymnastics, like if you're in college, you're out of the Olympics already. Like you've aged out. That's like this is how you get your post-career. Get your scholarship, get your degree, and either maybe get into coaching, gymnastics or whatever, or just move on to your actual career. Like gymnastics is over at that point. Because that's why the Olympics are they're like 16 years old or whatever, less even maybe. So if you get rid of the scholarship thing, it's like, why am I even going to college at that point? Like, I don't know. Did the men's even get gymnastics scholarships? I know there's some teams for that, but it's going to be crazy. We'll keep an eye on it, but we'll be focusing some of that more on the football side of things, just like everybody else this summer. Those other sports. I wanted to bring that up because I played baseball. Would that even exist in a future where they're having all these? Because even I'm trying to think of how the scholarship situation works for some of the smaller divisions. I think D2 you can have partials, maybe full scholarships at certain points. I don't know what the numbers would shake out to be. D3 they have to be tied to academics, I think. And so you're kind of just going from that and figuring out how many people can we have in and how are we able to kind of just, build this up. And if money's just coming into football instead, it's like you're fighting like your own people. Like, do we really need another concession stand here? It's like, yes, the donors asked for that. Because they can sign off, specifically say, this is for football, whatever. And then the university has to spend it on that or they can't touch it. I think they have to refund it or whatever. So if they say this is for player salaries, that's what it'll be. Let's transition now into NHL and NBA playoffs. We'll start with the NHL because I have more to talk about on that. I thought the Penguins had a great chance to advance and play the Hurricanes down here. And I was getting very excited for it. And then the one thing I wanted to talk about it, I don't know if it happened before the show last week or not, but Crosby gets hurt, right? And he took a shot to the head. I thought he had a concussion when I first saw it. He didn't come back in the game. It changed the entire series. I think the Penguins had a lead at that point. He goes out. They lose the game. It goes to Game 7. He's out in Game 6. I think they lose that one too, right? If I'm remembering the schedule correctly. Then he comes back. They say, hey, wait, he didn't have a concussion. Okay, well, was he hurt? No, he was fine. but why didn't he play then? And they're
just needed a break.
Well, was he cleared? And so now you're getting the narrative like, was he cleared? Yes. Well, was he injured? No. Your best guy, it cleared. The series clearly swung when he got hurt. And I know he's older, but at this point, like, he's like the best of this generation. So, like, what are you doing? And if he did have a concussion and he wasn't cleared, even though they said that he was now, like, just be honest. Like, that's like, it kind of annoys me, like the NFL type things. Like, hey, we care about player safety, but we're going to not say about these injuries. We're just going to be listed down as, like, injured. It's like, okay, well, is Christian McCaffrey, like, is he really injured or is he just faking it? Is he, like, going to play? And you don't know. And I think fantasy football really makes that, like, highlights that issue more than other sports so much. I mean, I guess if you're into fantasy baseball, but even then, I think you know ahead of time, like, hey, so-and-so, they're the starting pitcher, they're scratched, or this guy's not going to be in the lineup this day. With football, it's like, oh, yeah, they might play. They just list him as active or not. Like, okay, what the hell? Is he active? Is he going to play today? Should I play him or not? And so it's like Crosby, they're like, oh, he's not playing for sure. And so I'm like, oh, yeah, he has a concussion then. But then they just backtrack and be like, no. It's like, well, did the coach hold him out then? Did he hold himself out? I still have so many questions, and I'm just so baffled at the situation. What do you think on it?
Well, my whole thing was, how does the NHL continue to just have such a ridiculous thing for one of the best players in the league? Like, it's almost like, for as much hype as, like, Steph Curry and LeBron always get in the playoffs and just repetitively just punch them in the face and be like, NBA playoffs are just more physical. And then and then they get knocked out or, like, seriously injured, and you're like, well, that's what happens. It's a physical series.
It's what happens with Gronk. Everyone's chipping at his knee, and they're like, well, they can't stop him unless they do that. But I'm like, anyone else has a penalty on.
But it's like, there's, like, I would almost compare it to, like, if people were diving at Tom Brady and they're like, hey, the NFL is just a tough league. Like, we're just physical, and just completely wipe it under the table. Like, there's people that fall anywhere near Tom Brady and they're getting fined $300,000. Like, you know, you look at some of these other leagues and they're protecting the star players in those leagues and not just saying, well, it's playoff time. Physical things happen. Like, no. If you make some of those penalties, like if it was a cheap shot on Crosby, yet to boot, it wasn't like, oh, it was during play and, like, it was just a physical play. Like, clearly went out of his way to crack him in the dome to put him out because he was scoring goals at a rapid fire pace.
And that's what.
And
go ahead.
And kudos to the Rangers for knocking him out and getting away with it, because there was no consequence of knocking guys out. And I'm surprised that there wasn't retaliatory efforts done.
And that's what I was waiting for, because they were up 2-0 at the time, right? So all they have to do is win that game. But they lose both games, that in Game 6 and then Game 7. So, like, they were one game away from winning the series. And if he didn't play, so he's saying that him and the coach today said that he wasn't cleared. But then they're saying that he wasn't injured either.
But he's not cleared. How is he allowed to play? Like, then that raises a whole different issue. Or if, like, we're going to preventatively just hold you out just to make sure that things are okay and not follow protocol. Like,
well, that's what I don't understand. Like, so he passed. They said he never tested positive for a concussion. All right. Well, then what's he not cleared for?
Well, then
a neck injury. Like, that's just say what it is. Like, if he's out there saying, like, no, I wasn't cleared, it's like, do you have a concussion? Like, well, no. Okay, well, what are you cleared for then? Was it back? Was it upper? One thing said, like, upper arm. It's like, all right, well, why would he not be cleared for that? Like, what? I mean, I see guys, like, out there, like, missing teeth and stuff they're playing. like you have a bruised arm. I don't know why they would hold you out for that. If it was a spine or a neck or the concussion, like those are the only things that I would see that they could hold you out for. But the transparency is not there. And like you said, they let teams just beat the crap out of them. And every time it's like Penguins are in a physical series. It's like, yeah, no shit. Like, thanks. Thanks for that insight. They're just fighting each other, getting beat up. They're targeting the best guys. And then they're like, well, that's hockey. That's going to get people to watch. It's like, yeah, but if you protect your best guys, because like LeBron gets all those calls and like the fake flopping or whatever, and he keeps doing it because guess what? He's getting away with it because he's the biggest name in the game. So like they're sad when he doesn't make the playoffs. Like they can talk about like, oh, Golden State this and that, or Steph Curry or this and that, but they would rather have LeBron there. I mean, they'd be nuts if they didn't want him there. So I just don't see, like you said, even Tom Brady, they didn't really protect him as much. I think a lot of it was because of like the investigations. But now the NFL, I think they realize like, well, no, Tom Brady's our guy. Now they're really promoting him heavy. They're not doing anything really negative on Tom Brady. So that's what I want the NHL to kind of say is like, yeah, you have this guy. He might not last so much longer if you keep letting him get hurt. Because like at some point they want him to just carry him off on a stretcher, and that's like what everyone remembers him as. Like, yeah, remember when his last game? Like, oh yeah, that was brutal. That was a tough one to watch. So very sad there, and like they just kind of seem like, oh yeah, the Penguins didn't look better. It's like, yeah, they were crushing the Rangers until he got injured, and then that was a series. So like that was it. So they're saying he suffered the concussion. Then you're like, well, he didn't have a concussion. He just wasn't cleared. And I just want them to say, like, dude, he either had the concussion or he didn't. Because if they have a concussion rule, I've been waiting for the NFL to do that. Where if you have so many concussions in your career, you just have forced to medically retire. Because, like, who was it? Wes Welker, didn't he have that issue? Or am I thinking of someone else? There was a receiver that had just, like, so many concussions, they were like, look, you're done. And I know it's harder to kind of diagnose, but with like the new technology and like the measuring concussions, if they could put something in the helmet, I would think within like 10 years, I think we might see that. And NHL would probably just follow suit, I would think. And the other sports, I think like the ones where you don't wear helmets, like soccer, I think would be a little bit tougher because like you don't know unless they figure out a way to get them like everyone's wearing like a headband with the sensor in it or whatever to track your brain waves. But I think if you hit like a certain concussion spike, and I know they have them in helmets because I'm pretty sure we talked about Harbaugh was testing them at one of the camps the one year with like Nike, they were doing something with their helmets. And I think that they try to do it with Oregon too. And so if they have it, then you know that the NFL has it. So I don't know. Just sad. What did you think of the NHL playoffs so far?
Well, disappointed after Crosby got decked because I thought there was a potential for Pittsburgh to really make a run, and they seemed like they had a pretty decent level of the thing that they were playing very smoothly together, and that cohesiveness just like went out the window with the injuries.
And I honestly thought that they would make the Stanley Cup. I thought they looked the best out of the teams, and then he went down, and that completely flipped. Florida has not looked good. I'm surprised that they were able to come back and beat the Capitals. They lost to Tampa Bay tonight, 4-1. I think it was tonight. And then there was like okay, Florida doesn't look that good. That's going to clear the path for the Penguins. But on the other hand, I've been cheering for the Hurricanes too. They started choking. They looked awful. They pulled the same stunt where they lose like game 5 and 6, I believe. And then they win game 7 at home. And people were like, or not, was 5 away. They lost every away game. And they looked horrible doing it. And I remember thinking like, dude, if they don't get their shit together, they're out. And the Penguins are easily going to make it to at least to the Eastern Conference Finals. But then the Penguins didn't even get through. So That's what I want to see is just cleaner officiating, I guess, or calls like you said. Just make it so that I guess physical hockey is physical, but he wasn't like getting checked or anything. It's like right in the middle of the ice, they took a shot to the head. Like clean some of that up, and then even the one. So I think was it the Canes playing? One of the guys got hit in the face with the stick. They called a penalty on the wrong team because it was a player hitting his own player and with a clear high stick. And then they were like, well, that's not a penalty because he hit his own guy. I'm like, yeah, but he still did the high stick. Like, if you want to clear some of this up, just because he hit the other guy, he hit his own teammate instead of another guy, which they saw on replay, I'm like, put him in the penalty box anyway. Like, he shouldn't get rewarded for, like, hitting his own teammate instead. Like, why is the stick up so high? So there's some of that, too, that I'm like, you want to clean it up. And if you're going to have replay, make it meaningful. Like, we know that you saw the guy hit his own guy with a stick. That took 1 second to see. Why are you having 4 dudes look at it on the ice? Or whatever they were doing. Like, it took forever. I'm like, just call it in. Have a guy in the booth. Like, why doesn't hockey have that? Everything's right there. Have a guy in the booth. I want that for every sport. Every sport have that. Let me know what's happening. Everyone else is already watching it on TV. If I can see it on TV that the own guy hit his own player, they say no penalty on the other team. It was a high stick. He hit his own teammate, so he's getting the 2 minutes. Boom, done. Cleaning it up. That way, some of that stuff you don't really see. If it's starting to get aggressive, where dudes swinging a high stick, like protect them, protect the guys. That's all I care about. Anything else you have for the NHL?
No.
All right, NBA real quick. You want to talk about your Sixers?
There wasn't a lot to talk about. Just choking it away again.
Well, to be fair, they were the 4 seed, and I was going to talk about how all the top seeds advanced, but then the West, no, 3 and 4 advanced. So you have a 1, a 2, a 3, and a 4 seed left in the final 4 per se. That's more of a college trademark, but I'll say I don't understand, like, the Heat team, I know they're coming together good, but, like, at this point, the Heat should not be better than the Sixers. That's my feelings on it.
I get so infuriated watching Jimmy Butler play well for the Heat because I feel like they had him, and all they had to do is just keep him, and they let him go.
That's because they had so many guys. So, like, and to be honest, Butler, I feel like they've been hyping him up for so long, like he back with the Bulls or whatever, and all you hear about, like, hey, Jimmy Butler's going to be the guy. He's going to be awesome. It's like, at some point, you have to actually start doing that. You can't just be talking about how good you are on a losing team, Same with, like, Zion Williamson. Like, oh, he's great. It's like, okay. LeBron literally can lead Cleveland to the finals by himself. Like, Zion Williamson is no LeBron. And if you listen to the show, I'm not the biggest LeBron fan at all. So, like, you got to at least kind of recognize the game as it's being played. Because watching the Celtics play, the Celtics are kind of in the same boat where it's like, hey, we're not getting any better. Let's just bring Al Horford back. And we're going to keep with our team that's kind of good enough to make the playoffs, but we're not a championship threat. So if the Heat go through to the finals, I'm going to be like, what the hell? Of all the teams. But the Celtics right now, they're in a battle. Horford's not even playing. Either is Smart, I don't think. So Celtics are down for game 1. They're on the road. If they can kind of pull this one out, then I might have a little bit of faith in them going. And to be fair, the West teams, Dallas and Golden State, I know, like, Dallas, they've been waiting for their guy to take off. They've been kind of hyping him up, but not as much as Giannis, but the Celtics just knocked him back out, which I didn't think was going to happen. So, I don't know. I think it might be a chance for the number 1 seed, the Heat, to win a finals again, and my mind will just be blown. Because how do they rebuild like that? Without, like, LeBron or any of those guys, and how do they hit? Like, they got Duncan Robinson from Michigan, the guy from D3, that I thought, well, he's not really athletic to cover anyone at Michigan. He just shoots good. And then he's shooting well in the NBA. It's like, what the hell? Maybe he just shoots. Maybe you don't really need to play defense in the NBA. I don't know. Because I always hear that it's like, hey, so-and-so, they're not athletic enough to be drafted. It's like, yeah, but Duncan Robinson wasn't. He's got to be able to make your shots consistently. You make the shots, you'll make the team. Even if you're just riding like the second guy in the sub, not even the sixth man, you're like the eighth man. Just come in, make a few threes, and then take your time out. You get hot, they keep you in. Very simple. So I'm watching it. I wonder what the ratings are. Because, like, really, are there any bigger teams left? I know Boston has a gigantic following. Golden State probably does now from the bandwagon. I think most of the Miami fans from LeBron are probably gone now, right? So I don't think they would move to the Lakers for them.
Yeah.
So I wonder what's it going to look like. But we'll keep an eye on that. Same with the NHL. It's like, hey, your big franchises are out. Like Toronto. It's like, what are you doing? You lose every year? That the one guy in the post game, this could be my final bell. He looked like he was crying. I didn't know who the guy was, but he was like trying to say like the Maple Leafs should just blow it up. They should blow up the whole team and just start from scratch. And the one guy's like, they just lost a game 7, man. Most of the teams coming back, they could have a really good team next year. And he's like, it's every year. It's a heartbreak. It just made me laugh. And I'm like, bro, you're on TV. What are you doing? Like, maybe you're an all-time Maple Leaf great. I don't know who you are. Like, not from my era, because the Maple Leafs haven't been good for not in my lifetime, right? So, who knows when they've been good. But they're always, like, right there. And it's right. That's kind of like the Sixers now. They're just right there. People think they could make the run, and they never do. So, that's my final bill. You have anything else?
I saw recently Warren Sapp talking about the things that Tony Dungy was trying to get across to his players to not get in trouble. Did you see that?
No, what was that?
There's 5 situations that you need to be aware of to keep yourself out of major trouble. It's the 5 reasons athletes get themselves into situations. Number 1, out past midnight. Nothing good happens after midnight. Number 2, driving 15 miles an hour or more over the speed limit. Number 3, drugs or guns. 4, alcohol. 5, women you know too well or not well enough.
Oh, wait. Why'd he separate guns and drugs, and then also alcohol?
Because alcohol's a separate issue.
I feel like alcohol and drugs would be one, and then guns would be another separate issue.
Well, a lot of times the drugs come with guns. Because you're selling drugs, you got to have guns with you to protect your stash.
I guess, or you just have an Uzi in your car, and when you get pulled over, it's like...
Well, whichever way you want to... When you win the Super Bowl, you can make your own rules. He's just repeating what Tony Dungy said. And, you know, you look at some of these different things that come out, and almost every one of those players that have recently gotten themselves in trouble, they've pinged on at least a couple of those things that they should have been taken care of.
All right, I'm going to spin off that. I would say, all right, so if you're a high school coach or college coach even, I would say some of those you could probably give a warning on, like drugs and alcohol. And even high school, like their kids aren't even of age. So like you're going to be like, yeah, just don't do anything dumb. But like I would tell them the speeding one is definitely on there. And to go along with that, they should be like, don't text and drive. And then one of my biggest pet peeves, because I've seen a person almost get hit, it's when you're walking around campus or in the road, don't wear headphones. Like, why are you walking on a 4-lane highway with headphones on singing? Kids riding a bike. So close, Matt. I'm saying less than a foot away from getting hit by a truck. Because they're riding their bike and singing along with their headphones. So when they're singing, their head's bobbing. and didn't even see the truck. It's like, buddy, what are you doing? Like, if you're riding the bike, you can't be swerving back and forth on this highway. Like, the speed limit is 55, man. And it was a curve. There's no way the truck would have saw them. I tried to beep. I did my friendly thing, but I'm like, this isn't helping. This guy didn't even hear the beep. So that would be my number one. Headphones. Pay attention to what the hell you're doing. If you get hurt, that could ruin your entire life. If you even live. Like, you could easily have been dead watching that kid ride a bike. And I'm like, damn, dude. Dumb. What else? Yeah, I guess staying out late would be one. And then, like, the friends. I think the friends would be the biggest one. Like, yo, don't go out with people you don't know. At, like, weird times at night. But I don't know how much that would be. I mean, of course, study. That's added in for college or whatever. But what do you think of those? My main thing was the headphones and texting while driving. Because I think the kids not paying attention and they feel like they have to. I have to listen to this Southbound Sports Show. It's an awesome podcast. Like, I get that, guys. But don't get hit on your bike because you're listening to it. Like, that's insane.
For some people, it just triggers. It helps get the heart rate going.
They're like, well, if I'm ever could you imagine if it's like back in the 90s, everyone had the Bluetooth in, where they pretended like they were on their phone talking to someone, but in reality, they could have just been listening to our show and like giving quips. Like, what do you mean he's hurt? What did you want him to do? It's like, Tom Brady sucks. And you're at the store and you're like, oh my God, would you shut up, man? That's the reality now. That's what I should start doing. Listen to our show and give my own quips as I walk through the store. And then if someone's like, sir, are you on the phone? I'm like, oh no, I'm listening to the Southbound Sports Show. It helped get the word out, I think.
Or get you institutionalized.
No, you have the headphones in. That's a free pass. No one's even going to say anything to you. If you just point to the headphones. Although if you have, remember, the Beats were obnoxiously big. I don't even really see them since the AirPods came out. I don't see anyone like really wearing Beats anymore. It's always like the AirPods or like the other ones like kind of come in. I guess they're like sport ones. I don't think they're Apple. I guess Beats make them though anyway. But they're not like the big noticeable headphones like that Colin Kaepernick used to put on his ads. So, I don't know. But that's all I have for the show. You have anything else?
Nope.
All right, go to Southbound Sports. Like I said, if you really want to tell people about the show, put the headphones in, pretend you're talking to someone on the phone, and just like keep saying Southbound Sports Show so people look it up. Do that when you're out at the mall, walking around. It doesn't really matter at school. Let people know about the show. We appreciate it, and we'll see you next week.